All right, Dave Sheppard from MedWorld Advisors. Welcome back.
Hi, Adam. Great to see you again.
Thanks for coming on. So today will be quick. It's an exit prep session. We're talking about negotiations again. You and I chatted, and we decided we'd talk about in a negotiation for a sell-side transaction with a first-time seller heading into a negotiation, whether they're approaching this on their own or with an intermediary. What should they be thinking about? So, who is that first-time seller going to be negotiating with? Is it a certain type of buyer? What might they be looking for? As the intermediary, I know you're oftentimes speaking with all the stakeholders, including family members, everything. So anything you want to insert there, go for it. What are you negotiating? What are the typical? I mean, that's vague, but if we can keep it in, in a focused conversation, something like terms and price and seller involvement post-transaction, what are the main hot items that wind up being negotiated in your experience doing this day in and day out with MedWorld? And then kind of when do you start thinking about this? Like maybe you can talk a little bit about, the MedWorld process and when you really start thinking about leverage and strengths and weaknesses and everything else. So I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let you go through what you do.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate the question. And as I think about it, it's actually probably helpful if I answer that last question first. So when do you set this up? When you start thinking about it? You start thinking about that at the beginning, because whenever you're going through a process, you have to think about the end in mind. What's the outcome that you want to have? So you want to be thinking about, okay, who are my targets going to be? Who am I going to be negotiating with? What do I expect? What are the expectations that the seller has relative to the stakeholder objectives that they have, whether it's a founder, that person, him or her by themselves, or they got 20 people on the cap table or whatever it might be. What are the expectations? And so what are we going to need to involve in order to get them to that expectation level for them in today's market? And so that's always an important discussion to have with the stakeholders first to make sure that we're aligned, that's even achievable in today's market. And once we're aligned, then we go figure out who are we going to target. So that gets to your who question. And the who question can be a wide range. It can be within the business if there are people that would like to buy the business that are part of management. Maybe there could be a management buyout and discussion there. Usually that would involve also maybe bringing in a private equity firm to help to back the management in a kind of some kind of leverage situation. More likely, the more likely scenarios typically are financial buyers, which are private equity firms, and then also strategics. And it really depends upon the situation for each company as far as who's going to be the best particular buyer for that company. We like to engage a wide range of potential targets because that helps the process. The more competitive it is, the easier the negotiation becomes because you have a little more leverage in negotiation. So having leverage in negotiation is helpful. So as we create the value proposition for the company in the very beginning, to be able to show, so a target would understand what the value is for them so we can meet those stakeholder expectations. It's really important for us. So when you talk about a SWOT, we really are thinking about that for each specific target that's there. The value proposition for private equity company number one might be different than private equity company number four. It also might be completely different than strategic number three and strategic number five. And so we have to actually think about for each one, what's the value going to be for them? Because as they think about it, they're going to put together their models and think about how this is going to work in their business, how they're going to get their return on their investment. Is it going to enhance their portfolio? What kind of ROI are they going to get? If it's a PE firm that wants to sell it 5 years, how are they going to run that model? So we have to think about all that up front so that when we get to the negotiations, we're negotiating a level playing field because we understand what the buyer is looking for. And then we also want to help them to achieve that while making sure that ensuring that our seller is meeting the expectations that they have.
I'll just interject there saying, just listening to you, this you're describing a level of intimacy in terms of like buyer familiarity that you have as a niche intermediary. So if you're thinking about negotiating yourself or using the intermediary, especially a niche intermediary, that niche intermediary ideally is going to understand the different buyer types, maybe the actual buyers and what they're looking for. So what is, private equity company XYZ, what are they looking for in terms of bolt-on acquisitions that fit with their platform investment? The niche intermediary ideally is going to have familiarity with that. So what you're saying, Dave, is that you're thinking about these different buyers and maybe what they're likely to be negotiating. So if a private equity group is going to be interested in management because they don't have their own management team in place and they're just coming in and they're mainly a financial buyer, then that's one thing you'll be thinking about. But then maybe a strategic, they've got a great management team, they don't care as much about management, so you need to think about other strengths or weaknesses that will be involved with the selling company that you're going to wind up discussing with that type of buyer. Is that what you're focused on? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right on point. On the private equity folks, some of them this might be a platform, and so they will be looking at it in one way if they're thinking about a platform that they can build on as far as a platform investment. So essentially, when I say a platform, they're thinking about it as this could be a company I could buy, I can invest in, and then I could make other acquisitions to make this company even stronger over time. Or they may be thinking about it as a bolt-on acquisition. So it's something incremental to another platform company that they already have. And those are two different scenarios. In the platform situation, the company needs to be able to stand on its own 2 feet in terms of the investment scenario, and it needs to be large enough to make that worth their while. Private equity companies don't like to make platform investments for $5 million companies. They will make bolt-on acquisitions for $5 million companies. And so in the platform situation, you have to be thinking about, okay, what market segments are they in? How can we attract those private equity companies that we know are interested in healthcare? Because given the fact that we are a niche intermediary, as I talked about, we know who those companies are, and some things are more attractive to them than others. So how can we make sure that they understand the value here and how this could be attractive for them? And then for the bolt-ons, it's a little bit easier because we understand the investment that they've already made in the terms of the company, the platform company they have, and where the potential synergies could be for them in terms of making this additional incremental acquisition for that company. And then therefore we can help negotiate on behalf of the seller relative to what the fit is for that particular private equity company, trying to meet the seller's expectations.
But taking it back to 30,000 feet for that first time, because we dove a little deep there for a first time seller, just to zip back up. For you as an intermediary, as a middle market intermediary, you might have a closed auction with 5, 10 potential acquirers, but you are putting yourself in the shoes of the buyer, asking yourself, what are they interested? What do they want? And then you're thinking about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats that you're going to wind up negotiating, that you're going to be discussing at the table for each particular buyer. You're doing that in advance with a seller before you even make the approach, or before you've let them into the data room for certain.
Yeah, and that's actually been we've been told actually by buyers, both private equity and strategic buyers, that they actually like working with us when we're involved, is because our team, myself and others, have been on the other side of the table of this, and we understand on the private equity side and the strategic side what the buying process is and what are the things that they are going to be looking for. So we try to make it as easy as possible for that buyer to understand what the opportunity is. What we really know about buyers is a lot of times they can be a little bit trendy. People run towards the hot thing at the moment, and when in the case where that momentum is building, you have to let them know, here's how that fits into that trend that they want to invest in. So that part's it's easier. Nothing's ever easy, but easier that they would be interested in. When things are not so pretty, however, it's still going to be a good investment for them. They still might buy. They still might make an investment. They still might acquire. As long as they understand what it is. Like, for example, a company might be strategic to them, but maybe they had a bad year. They might be overlooked that because of the fact they already see the overall picture and how it fits in. Where buyers have the biggest challenge is uncertainty. So they just don't know when it's ambiguous as far as what it is or what the financials are or what are they really selling. Then that's where buyers walk away, because nobody writes a check in uncertainty. They will write a check for something that maybe isn't as pretty as they'd like it to be. They'll definitely write it when things are trending the right way. But the uncertainty is what we try to avoid. We want to make it clarity for the buyer. This is what you're going to get if you take this on, and here's the value proposition you're going to receive.
So that's something you're going through with your sellers for each potential buyer. You want to remove the uncertainty, and you're just combing through any issues that would scream uncertainty, and you're preparing your negotiations in advance, knowing what those hot items are.
Yeah, and we're very it's very important to us, because we do know that the buyers that we work with, and they actually expect us to do a little bit of that, so that they don't waste their time. Because part of a good process is to get a lot of buyers involved. And if a process is not, if a buyer is not feeling comfortable that the package is together, that they can get the information they need, they don't want to get started, because they're going to have to engage other people, the private equity firm, their investment committee. If it's a strategic, they'll sometimes get 15, 20 people involved cross-functionally in it. And if they don't feel like that the package is going to be ready for them to get people alignment in their company, they're going to walk away, because they don't want people to waste their time on it. So that's part of what we do, is we help them understand, hey, before we're actually bringing this to you, we've done the work with the seller, so you can understand the it is what it is. And if you like it, let's deeper dive that. And if you don't like it, it's okay, because we got other buyers in mind for this particular opportunity. But let's don't waste each other's time. And if there is interest, let's get productive and figure out how we negotiate the right deal for both parties.
Got it. That's great. Okay, I think that's a great overview. We could go through if there are any particular hot items. I think this is kind of vague. If there's something that you're focused on. So if you have a template, I'm going to shake you down for potential MedWorld template in terms of the framework that you use to go into negotiations. Hopefully we'll have that under this video in the exit prep workshop, if I'm successful at that sale with you, Dave. But if there are any hot items that you typically go through, that wind up being negotiated, I mean, is there anything you can speak to? I mean, again, price, terms, seller involvement. Is there anything that sticks out as coming up over and over and over again at the negotiation table that a first-time seller should clearly be aware of?
Yeah, and the obvious one is valuation, right? So that's the starting point. And then when you break down valuation, because sometimes first-time sellers can get a little bit excited about a valuation. Let's say somebody says, "Hey, you're worth 50 million." And you thought maybe I'm only going to get 30 for this. So you go, great. But then you find out the first payment's 10 million and I'm going to pay you 40 million over the next 20 years. Then that's not so exciting anymore. So it's the valuation for the business. And then it's how are you going to get paid that valuation? Yeah. How much of that is going to be cash? How much is that might be in a seller note if the buyer wants that from you? How much it might be in terms of, let's say that the buyer believes your growth story and they're willing to pay you some of that valuation for the growth story. Maybe they want to have a little bit of an earn out just so that you're a little bit on the hook and accountable for that growth, for you to be able to get that valuation. So all of those things start to become negotiable.
Yeah. And again, since this video is for the first time seller, that valuation oftentimes comes down to a cash flow number. And so everything that goes into that cash flow number, be prepared to negotiate, right? What's been taken out, what's been putting in, that's going to be combed through with a fine tooth comb. So
that's usually the start. That's usually the starting point, because all buyers, whether they're strategic or private equity, they start with a formulaic, and then from there. Yeah. But this is the hidden secret, Adam. Is from there everything's negotiable. So we've had situations where outside consultants have come in and told our buyers that, hey, how did you end up paying that much for that business? And we actually we feel good about when we hear those statements. And the reason is we got in a situation where everybody comes in, they're following their formulas, and we're not going to, on the seller's behalf, we're going to let the seller to evaluate all their options. It's not our job to say yes or no for a seller. Our job is to find out what the value is for them and what they could have the opportunity to work with. So what we're going to do is get people into the game, help them work with each other, and find out, the more the buyer likes the particular seller, they might pay a little more beyond the formulas. The more that they find the strategic fit is a little deeper than that, they might go pay a little more. The more they find, oh, I didn't know about that R&D thing in the pipeline that's going to launch next year. That's just going to change the paradigm. I might be willing to pay a little bit more for those. So those are the things. But you have to start with get everybody comfortable with each other, get them in the game with each other, and then anything can happen.
So you're trying to keep the negotiation friendly throughout the process. You can build up that camaraderie and hopefully identify those points of overlap.
One of my helpful learnings along the way, and I've had a lot of them, was working with the Japanese. The Japanese, they don't say no to anything, and it sometimes it drives you nuts a little bit. But when you actually think about the style, it's really helpful to keep the conversation going. You want to act a little faster than sometimes the Japanese do, because they can be they're known for being a little slow. But if you combine that with your own style, it's actually very effective, because maybe somebody wants something. So we're not going to say no to it. We're going to say, well, what if we think about it this way? Because that way we turn that more into a win-win. Because once you say no, then there's no more conversation. And so what we want to do is keep everybody talking until we get to the win-win.
Yeah. So you, as an intermediary, will try to keep that alive and keep people from shutting it down on either end with a no. All right. Well, Dave, I think our time is up. That was a great way to close it out. This has been really helpful. And we'll see you at the next one. But thank you for coming today. Again, Dave Sheppard, MedWorld Advisors. We'll have all of your contact info under the video or in the podcast if you're listening to this. So thanks for coming on today, Dave.
Thank you, Adam. Have a good day.
Take care.